Today on Heartwork, Journey interviews Noah Althoff. He's like a big jambalaya of creativity. It's going to be a cool episode. Check it out.
All right, Noah, I get to work with you a little bit here at Encounter on the tech side of things. But for those of you that don't know who you are, what you do, could you just share with us a little bit about what you do here at Encounter and maybe what you do outside of Encounter as well?
Yeah, sure. So Encounter is, in a sense, kind of one of my clients from a music production business, and I help here in a couple different roles that have kind of evolved as I've continued to work here. One of the predominant roles is just maintaining the sound culture here, training new sound volunteers, running sound at a lot of the services, that sort of thing. But one of the larger goals that's kind of developed as my time here has kind of progressed, and it kind of develops into what I do for other artists for the rest of my time, is kind of on the record production side of things. And we have a lot of really, really talented songwriters, musicians, and artists that come to the church here and that we just meet through different facets of the music ministry here. And a big part of my job and kind of my role on that team is to help take the songs that they write and turn them into finished records, help them kind of through that whole process. A lot of the artists that come through here haven't had a lot of experience in the studio side of things, which is really kind of my personal focus and my own passion, and kind of getting to help them develop their songs, arrange it out, and then working with the different musicians and the team members here to really help them create a finished piece that listeners are going to be able to enjoy, and it's going to be able to carry their music and their light to the people around them.
How did that passion come about? Did it just one day you were just like, I don't know, maybe you heard like a terrible record and you were like, man, I could do so much better.
Never
or like,
again.
Like how did you develop that passion?
Yeah. So when I was maybe 6, 7, my parents forced me into taking piano lessons, and I absolutely hated it. I wasn't really into music until I got into high school and I picked up a guitar. And from there, I was just kind of hooked from there. A pretty typical high school kid, wanted to be in a rock band sort of story. And my dad got me this little 8-track recorder, and it was super old school. You know, it's funny because now everything's done on computers and that sort of thing. But I started out with this older recorder and just started messing around with it. I was writing songs with my cousin at the time and thought it'd be cool to make an album. And at the time, I didn't really know a lot of other musicians, so it was kind of up to me to take a song that I wrote, and I have to add drums to it, bass, keyboards, vocal harmonies. And I didn't know how to do any of that stuff either, which was kind of the fun of it. It was all just experimentation, kind of figuring stuff out in the moment. And through the process, I think I started to really love putting the puzzle pieces together with a record, and how much of there's just a whole facet of what you can do in music that I didn't realize was an option, even at that time. And I think it really hit me as soon as I started bringing friends over to the house in high school and saying, hey, let me record this song that you wrote. And then they didn't know how to play any of those instruments. I'm like, well, I'll do it. And then I started writing all these parts and just building all of these layers into a piece of music to shape a person's experience with it. And I was just completely hooked on that process. And as soon as I started working on other people's music was really when I realized my passion. And it wasn't so much my own music. That was sort of just a bridge point to get me to what I'm doing now, which is how can I help other people share their music with their fans and help them get that across to the people that matter.
That's really cool. No,
yeah.
I resonated with the typical high school kid wants to be a rock star, because I feel like 29 years old, I'm still the want to be a rock star kind of guy, but I can't play anything. I guess I can play like 2 or 3 chords on the guitar.
Okay.
And so, but I can't sing at all.
Did you play anything in high school?
No, nothing in high school.
Okay.
I remember 3rd grade. We learned the recorder, as I'm sure many people have done. But I made my mom go out and buy me a recorder that summer. I thought I was going to be like the world's first traveling recorder.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, somebody made it big with that kind of instrument. With the ringtones on your iPhone and stuff. But
yeah.
I don't know what they're getting paid in royalties for that. But I am passionate about music, which I think is why I think this conversation is going to be very interesting. Although I don't know very much about it.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, and I know some bands and things like that. But what would you say is your genre of music that you, if you had to pick one, or if you had to just describe yourself in your own brand of music, what would that kind of, how would that fit in?
Like that I enjoy listening to, or that I sort of typically work in on a production level, or and?
Yeah, both
Okay.
and. Yeah, both and.
Man, so I was just like a straight metal and rock and roll kid in high school. And, I was one of those, I grew up in the church, and my favorite band was Skillet for a really, really long time, as I think everybody in high school, that's your favorite band. I've been to so many Skillet concerts. But it really evolved quickly. As soon as I really picked up a guitar, I got into blues music and classic rock, and kind of the 60s and 70s as recording technology was developing, and that whole idea of sound design and making a record. I was just so fascinated with that specific era of the recording industry, and I think that just kind of evolved into the music that I listened to for a long time there too. What I listen to a lot of now is kind of a mix of that, a little bit of country, but what I do predominantly for the artists I work with is kind of this indie pop space, which is independent pop artists that are kind of newer on their journeys in the music industry, and they're kind of figuring things out. The cool thing about the indie pop world and how listeners in my generation are starting to encounter music is we're in this age of streaming and Spotify, and it's not so much defined by genre boxes anymore. Like, maybe 10, 20 years ago, so much of your identity was wrapped up into the kind of music you listen to. If you were into rap or rock or classical, and I think that the modern listener, their ear is just so accustomed to hearing anything and everything on the same playlist. And so the music that I work in, this indie pop, is kind of creating music that would sit well with a pop audience. It has all of the hooks and the energy that pop music does, but it's not afraid to burst the bubbles of genre and kind of just, what if we took things here and added influence from one of these other genres, or kind of breaking the mold of what you would typically expect out of maybe like pop radio, but still fitting a lot of the format of catchy hooks and energy and that sort of thing.
Evan, a guy we both know.
Yeah.
Evan's kind of turned me on to this guy, Heath McNeese. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but
he's super familiar.
He does a little, hip hop. He actually did like the Chronicles of Narnia, like hip hop style. I think he did a little bit more of like C.S. Lewis's works and stuff like that in hip hop.
Wow.
But he's also done like some, some of his music is a lot different. And I admittedly have not like dove fully in yet, but it's just pretty cool to see that. And it makes sense, because a lot of people, would always ask me, what kind of music are you into? What kind of music? And I'm really into a little bit of everything, except for I really don't jive with the absolute screaming side of rock. But for the most part, like hip hop, rock, pop, all those different kinds of things, and bringing that into the creative space of one song, I think is a really cool thing, and would meet the needs of a lot of people, would meet the interests of a lot of people. So, but no, one of the things that really that I admire about you is your level of creativity and how you kind of just allow it to take shape. And so I understand that. I've come to understand my own self as someone who's creative in a little bit different way than typically would be labeled. Creatives, the ones that the ones that you can't ever expect to be on time or do those things, and all those stigmas that the creatives quote unquote get. But I've kind of been able to understand how I'm creative and how God wired me to be creative, and I've had to grow into that. So could you kind of talk through that process a little bit for your own self? Like I can only imagine, being in high school or even early college age, being where I'm going to do music, and a lot of people telling you, well, maybe you should have a backup plan. Maybe you should have plan B. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sort of like the process of figuring that out for myself? Yeah, I mean, even before I was into music, I was writing as a kid. So I was just always fascinated by anything that was like any form of artistic expression. I think I just had a huge level of appreciation for, even when I was really young. And it just kind of took over my life, especially when I started playing music. And there wasn't even too much intention about it. I think it just kind of organically happened. I became really fascinated with it, and it created in me this appreciation for other forms of art too, even outside of music, and drew me back into writing and reading. And I can't paint to save my life, but I've become such a fan of visual art too, and other mediums. I think for a certain kind of person, it's just you find it and you just latch onto it so quickly that it's not even a question anymore. And I think that's kind of what happened to me. And it was definitely a difficult process when I was first kind of realizing that in myself, realizing that a certain kind of person, it's really hard for you to do anything but create after you've discovered that in yourself. And that looks different for everybody, like you said, and what that actually means. I think that some of that, if you want to get theological about it, there's something about that idea of being in the Imago Dei and the image of God and God as creator. And we're meant to reflect that in our own unique ways, not limited to artists in the traditional sense. But we find that thing and we latch onto it, and it just kind of hooks into us and in our identity. And I think for me, that just really happened. And when I first realized that about myself, it took some time to figure out, what does that actually mean for my life? Again, practically, what do you do for a living in that sense? And that's an ongoing journey. And I've realized that as I've talked to more and more creatives, that you begin to value that creative rush more than whatever that is defined by in the moment. So having a creative career doesn't necessarily mean touring the world in a rock band. Even for a musician, there's so many different facets of what that could actually practically look like, and different ways to harness that creativity in a career field, even if that's producing podcasts or things like that. There's other ways that you can get into it. And I think that for me, I think I was really fortunate that I got hooked into the production side of things, because just with where the industry is sitting right now, it turned out to be a really good fit for me and something I enjoy. I can sustain myself with creatively. But I think that, so much of it is just, it gets its hooks in you, and then you don't even have another choice at that point.
That's good. I actually I've heard that said with pastoring. If you can do anything else, go do it. And I feel like maybe that's kind of a similar mindset of an artist, of any of those kind of mediums that you described, music or painting or any of those things. And but I understand too, and you seem to understand that there's a balance to being able to supporting yourself, and it's not like everybody talks about starving artists, and
right.
How are you going to make this into a career? But something that you stuck out when you got a little theological on us. Do you think? And I'm just trying to reflect on my own journey, but as I grew into my own creative space, I was then able to appreciate and understand other people's creative, how they were wired, their creativeness. And do you think that has anything to do with your journey at all? Do you seem to? Is there a more of appreciation and respect for the different layers of creativity that exist around different people?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that you could say that like almost like the relational nature of creativity, that we sort of, the more that you sort of have that process of self-discovery, you start to see that same process in other people and come to respect what it means for them and what it looks like in their lives. And I think that that's really when, for me, it hit me, that full spectrum of what it means to be a creative person. And like we said, it's not limited to a traditional role as an artist or anything like that, but how different people are uniquely gifted to do different things, which all in one way or another utilize their own personal brand of creativity in what they do. And I think that there's so much beauty in being able to see that in other people, and I'm still learning how to do that. But as soon as I had that sort of process of self-discovery, which I think is really essential to it, that kind of breeds that understanding, that empathy for other people in their own creative processes. And then you just kind of get this love for seeing that in other people too.